everybody. Welcome back to the tutorial for MVC Web Applications. This is part 4. What we're going to talk about now is a class called DB Context. That's this one right here. In particular, the template comes with a ready-to-use context for users. And they call that user's context. Now what this does here is it takes the connection string that is in our web config. We're looking for, in this case, default connections. So it takes this connection string and puts it into DB context as a parameter. And what that does is it opens up all of the abilities of that database. And in particular, it gives us access to the user profile table. Now, if we go back into the server and look at user profiles, you'll see this table is there already. All right. Now, you'll notice that the other 4 tables are not there. We're going to deal with that later, but in the meantime what we're going to do is just get started with a simple database. We're going to start extending some classes of our own here, adding our own controllers and models. So I could use entity framework data migrations, but I tend to find that it doesn't work as well as I would like. So I'm going to do this, let's call it the long way. I like to start with data tables first. And by doing data tables first, in my mind, you have a little more control over what the end resulting table looks like. We'll just wait for the design service to load. Now, what we have here is a blank table. Okay, we have one pane here, which is the SQL pane or query pane. The other one is the design pane. All right, we're going to create a simple table here. We're going to call this animals. Okay, and because our table is called animals, the non-plural form, or each individual object called animal, should have an ID of animal ID. Okay, so it's the non-plural form because each object in the database is one of those things. We're going to have a name, and in particular, we're going to call this nvarchar. You'll notice here we have this column that says allow nulls. Every animal that we enter into our database must have a name, at least. It can't be empty, in other words. So we don't want to allow nulls. Okay. Now, something else that I tend to put into almost all of my data tables is a create and edit date. Now, we'll use those later on, but essentially, when we create our object, we're going to set the date that it was created, and date and time that is, so that as we have this information available to us later on, we may want to use that so that we know when we actually created the data. Because if you're building a business application, there's a lot of times where the create date or edit date are of significant importance in forensic data analysis to understand when something was created, when it was edited. So they're helpful objects to work with. Now you'll want to as well set a default of get date. Okay, and get date, what that does is it sets the date every time you add an animal object. In this case, it's going to set the date by default. And we do the same for edit date. Okay. All right. Now, we've got some basic information in here. Why don't we add in, we'll add in a type. And you'll see now that I'm going to go down to the query pane. And I'm going to call this animal type. Okay, char. And it's going to be an nvarchar again. Now, because I made it in the query pane, you'll see it appears up here too. Okay. And something I didn't explain first is that the first thing you need to do is set the table name. Because if I run the update command and I didn't set the table name, it's going to run into a problem and it's just going to create a table called table, which isn't very helpful for you. So try to remember that. So now we're going to run the update process, and it'll prepare the update script. Okay, it's going to create an animals table and two constraints. The default constraints simply mean that it sets a default, and that was our get date. Okay, we're going to update the table. And for all intents and purposes, it shows that we have a nice green check mark. Usually means a good thing. Okay, let's close this up. And we're going to add that model now. So if you recall, we go to new item. Now there's a couple shorter ways to do this, and I'm always taking you through the longer ways just for practice. You'll notice I'm going to just leave it to model 1. I'm not going to worry about the fact that it creates a new context for us, because we're going to just pull that data out anyway. Okay, just remember, follow these steps carefully. There's a few steps to getting us done, but it does get us out of there quicker. All right, we're going to start off by using the data context settings. It's basically the same as default context, but it'll get us up and running a little quicker. We're not going to create a new connection string. And then we click next. Now, we're going to just retrieve our animals data table. Okay, then we click finish. Okay, so what we have here is a new model 1 class, and it's based on DB context. You see that it looks very similar to our users context. Okay, now in particular, we want to take this data table out. We're going to put it into our data context. Okay, I'm going to add a little extra space here, and we're going to call this custom objects. All right, then we save that. Let's just go look over here, make sure we're not forgetting anything. And it looks like we've got all the information we need out of model 1. So now we just simply delete model 1. Okay. Now, we're going to set up MVC scaffolding. Okay. And to do this, we do install package MVC scaffolding. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to run some simple commands from this module called package manager console. It's going to allow us to run some very simple commands that will create our controllers for us and views in very quick amount of time. Again, let's try not to spend too much time on the details at this point. Later on, we'll start to get into the finer points of coding. Okay, let's run that. All right, so while it's setting up here, it takes a little bit of time, but once we've got MVC scaffolding installed, it's a very, very helpful tool. And as a developer that does a lot of these types of programs or projects, I find this saves me many hours of just of startup time. So again, if we can get up starting fast, then it allows us to get into the real project that we're trying to accomplish. Okay, so the command is scaffold controller animal. Okay, and that relates to the animal object. And we just push enter. So you'll see now that it's scaffolding the controller. Sometimes it can take a little bit of time. Hopefully it won't take too much time in what we're doing. It also creates a data context for us. We don't need that data context, so we're going to make a couple changes to our controller. We might as well just do that now, seeing it's already set up. Okay, so here it puts in web application context, and what I in fact simply want it to be is just data context. That's the one we've set up. Okay, once we change that, that context object is available throughout our controller, and we can now take a good look here. We'll just make sure that we're not losing anything if we delete web application context. So we will do that. Okay. Now, to prove that this worked, let's just go ahead and run it. Now what we'll do is we'll get into our database. And we haven't set any shortcuts up to access our animals controller yet, but we will. So just to get up and running fast, I'm going to do this. We type /animals. Now, in accessing controllers, your controllers are always accessed based on the database name. So in this case, it's animals, and the controller name would be animals controller. Okay. Now we have an index view. This index view has a create new, so let's just see what we have here. Now, you'll notice we've got a name, animal type, create date, edit date. Okay. Now, the context doesn't draw in that default data that we wanted earlier, so we have to modify the controller slightly. And I think what I'm going to do is wrap up this session and save that lesson for part 5. Thanks for watching. See you soon.